Hey folks, we're gonna get started here. We're gonna catch up, myself, and hopefully this is helpful for you guys to quickly know all of the different things that are being discussed about HHN33 and what could be coming to the event. So I've got Speculation Map version 1 pulled up, courtesy of Horror Night Nightmares, and starting over at Soundstage 23A, the symbol looks like Latin America, essentially. And if you don't follow the Hollywood event, they had Monstruos, the Monsters of Latin America, which was basically folklore come to life in like a combination house with 3 different monsters. This could very much be something borrowed from there, and I think most are agreeing. I haven't seen any other possibilities suggested for this one. It's most likely going to be some combination of folklore brought over from the House of the Year last year, Monstruos. Next up is Soundstage 22. The general consensus is this is likely a vampire-based house. We don't particularly know whether or not that means Dracula himself, or because it does have the film reel icon, meaning it's an IP, it is likely to have been derived from a movie. Now, I've seen a lot of different movies mentioned here. Abigail is one, Nosferatu is another, and The Last Voyage of Demeter is the other. So those 3 specific movies have been mentioned a few times. I feel like this is one of the ones, other than The Unknowns, that has a lot of possibilities at the moment. Next up, we move over to Soundstage 23B, and I think we're all in agreement on what IP this is, and that is Ghostbusters. The Cadillac symbol is the car that's used, the Ghostbusters car. The question remains then, is it going to be in celebration of, say, the 35th anniversary of Ghostbusters 2? Or will it have anything to do with the movie that recently released, Frozen Empire? Really, that's all I can say is unknown about it, but everyone seems to be in agreement. This is definitely going to be a Ghostbusters house. Next up in the top left, we have Soundstage 24A in a sort of black and white skull here. Now, a lot of people cleverly noticed the tribute store had a logo that is very similar to this, and the black and white type of comic sort of motif is something that ties in well. So maybe we're going to get something with Boris Schuster again, kind of like the Case Files Unearthed, or something to do with Legendary Truth. Another type of like out there thing that I've seen suggested is the Killustrator from an overseas Horror Nights event that did a similar house, and I'll leave that for you to look up. Moving on, at Soundstage 24B, we have this very swirly lollipop. A lot of people are suggesting this means Major Sweets, aka from the Sweets Revenge Scare Zone of 2022. Now, it is pretty common for houses to become scare zones and vice versa. I believe that happened with Cornstalkers most recently as an example, but when I went and looked back, I didn't see this symbol anywhere that I could find, at least in retrospect. Maybe some of you who got to go to the event more frequently might remember this lollipop, this particular lollipop symbol from somewhere, but looking at Major Sweets, his hat had like a little boo lollipop. I didn't see anything that really solidified and convinced me that it's definitely going to be Major Sweets, but I definitely would be very into that idea. Moving on to Fast and Furious, this is an unknown IP, however there are some pretty good guesses out there as to what could go into this space. The code name was Cobbler, and because of the layout of this, and if you do not recall, it's kind of split into 2 separate houses, and this is where the Horrors of Blumhouse was put in. 2 separate movies were featured in that house, and it does have kind of an awkward split, which made the Chucky experience last year kind of not the best, a little awkward in the middle. We thought it was over before it was over. So sadly, a lot of people had kind of, and jokingly suggested that it would be the Glasgow Willy Wonka and the Unknown. However, a lot of people are suggesting it might be some sort of combination of like Five Nights at Freddy's, which would be difficult to have an entire house of, and may be better suited to being like half or a third of a house, mixed with some other Blumhouse movies that are coming out this year. Next, over at Sprung 10.3, an IP house with a symbol of I guess, muting or silence. A lot of people jump to A Quiet Place, which does have a movie coming out this year. Others have been saying Silent Hill. I would love to see either one of those. I don't know how to picture A Quiet Place as a house, really. In all honesty, I could see Silent Hill being more of the realistic thing to happen, mainly because they have a remake coming and a movie sequel in the works, so that kind of forms a similar type of vibe as Last of Us in terms of where it was at in in popularity. So for pop culture's sake and all of that stuff, and the fact that there was a Silent Hill house already, even though it was quite a few years ago, I'm kind of leaning towards Silent Hill. I've also seen some people mention that John Murdy kind of teased Silence of the Lambs on his Twitter, which would make for an interesting house. The other thing that makes me believe that A Quiet Place isn't going to be the house is the fact that Paramount is producing this, and they don't have any sort of working relationship with Universal in terms of Horror Nights. I went as far back as 2012 and couldn't find a house or scare zone or any sort of characters that were borrowed from films or properties that they own the rights to. So Silent Hill would be my guess. Unknown Original and Sprung Tent 2, a lot of people are kind of hoping for a Slaughter Cinema 2. Also, I can't recall off the top of my head whether or not Universal Monsters counted as an IP or not, but we haven't heard anything about Universal Monsters making an appearance here and whether there would be any sort of setup story-wise for the land that's going to be in Epic Universe within HHN this year. Next up over at Sprung Tent 1, we have a bull, presumably a minotaur with some spears, presumably some hoplite spears coming out of Greek mythology. Previously there's been a Hades house which did have a minotaur, so that creature has made an appearance before. It could make another appearance. Others have suggested that since Poseidon's Fury has closed, that this might be a way to integrate that in a similar way that Dueling Dragons was. And the last house on the spec map, we have Sprung Tent 4, which is an IP house, and everybody is sort of in agreement on this, that it's going to be Nightmare on Elm Street. The timing of a Nightmare on Elm Street house is really suspect, and the reason most people are leaning towards it. It's the 40th anniversary of the original movie, and to what I've been able to search, they've done nothing about the original. Now, also to my knowledge, the rights for both Jason and Freddy are kind of up in the air because it has mixed rights owners. So if this is indeed a Nightmare on Elm Street house, I don't know how they managed to get the rights to Freddy and to honor the 40th anniversary of that movie. So that's it for all of the houses. Now let's take a look at the shows. We don't know anything about the scare zones, by the way, so I'm not really going to bring that up. So first off, the Death Eaters. They're making a comeback, which I don't know what kind of schedule they were on, but I do know for a fact that they were showing up before the event started because of some kind of rules that came up with utilizing the Death Eaters in Orlando. But you can clearly see that some sort of Fuel Nightmare pyro-heavy show is going to be making a comeback. Hopefully they do something a little bit different this time, since they have done Nightmare Fuel for 3 years straight, and it would be nice to just kind of change up the theme. Me personally, I kind of wish it would be something with Beetlejuice, who did have like a castle as the backdrop, and that featured a bunch of different monsters and such, but it was a comedy show. And then lastly, speaking of shows, on the map there's nothing for a Lagoon show. I feel like that this event, with the amount of people that are attending, it would have been so nice to have some sort of Lagoon show to eat people and have them in one place for a certain amount of time, just off the streets. However, because I think they're debuting their first show since doing all of this refurbishment to the Lagoon, I was had my fingers crossed that something would be coming here, and there's still a possibility of that happening, but right now it's anybody's guess whether or not we'll get another Lagoon show this year. So that's it for all the speculation and everything that I found out while scouring the internet. I came a little bit late to this one. Maybe I'll come in earlier for 2.0. However, I do want to mention again, if there is a potential icon this year, I think it's going to be the Curator, who was featured in the Tribute store. But if there's anything I missed, please let me know down below in the comments, and let me know what else you'd be excited to see at an HHN event. But for now, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the fog and during Spec Map 2. Also, for those of you who want to check out the Hollywood Spec Map video, I'll put that right in the corner here.